This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Medical experts say drop in COVID-19 Omicron cases suggests South Africa's peak may have passed. Uganda considers booster shots following a surge in COVID-19 cases. And what next for Libya after presidential election delay? Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. We'll bring you the details on those stories in just a moment, but first, here's Rama Nyang with the day's business headlines. Rama.
That's right, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in the next half hour. Coming up in business, China vows to further open up the world's second largest economy to the rest of the world. And authorities in South Africa are signalling their support for a review of the country's fuel pricing formula. We'll have the details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. A plane crash has killed at least 3 people in eastern DRC, according to a local official. The airplane crashed in South Kivu province on Thursday. The provincial transport minister says 6 people were on board the flight. Emergency services have been dispatched to the site to find survivors. A drop in Omicron cases might signal South Africa has passed its most recent COVID-19 surge. This is according to medical experts. After a high of nearly 27,000 new cases nationwide on Thursday, the numbers dropped to about 15,424 on Tuesday. The daily virus counts can, however, be unreliable. They can be affected by reporting delays, uneven testing, or other factors. South African scientists were the first to report and record the Omicron variant. The COVID-19 variant has spread across the world. In the US, Omicron accounts for 73% of new cases. Well, let's cross over to CGTN's Angelo Coppola. He's in Johannesburg for us. Angelo, what's the latest data on the COVID-19 cases in South Africa, and is the country out of the woods yet?
Well, look, overnight, the data shows that there were some 21,099 new cases, 99 more deaths, and a positivity rate which has now jumped back over 30%. The number of new positive cases is also still climbing in the coastal provinces of KwaZulu-Natal, which saw 5,400 new cases, and in the Western Cape there were another 4,600 odd cases there. Gauteng has dropped into 3rd place with around 3,800 cases. According to the National Institute of Communicable Diseases, the highest weekly incidence rate was reported in the 50 to 54-year age group, and the lowest was in the 5 to 9-year age group, so that's good news there. Meanwhile, on hospitalizations, we are seeing hospital numbers climbing a little, but still well below what was seen in the Delta-driven 3rd phase or 3rd wave that we saw. And Gauteng provincial hospitalizations are also dropping in line with those infection rates and those testing numbers. So it looks like we're over that peak, and we'll just have to wait to see what happens in the coastal provinces as those people go down on holiday. Beatrice.
Well, Angelo, we do know that South African health regulator has approved the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 boosters. Can you tell us more about this?
Well, that's the big news of the day, and that's for people who've had the double shot J&J vaccine. They get that 3rd dose or 3rd booster shot 2 months after their first shot. So that starts from tomorrow. For those of us who had the single shot Pfizer shot, well, we'll have to wait 6 months from the shot that we had then. This is an attempt to bolster immunity, reduce risk of contracting severe symptoms, and avoid hospitalization. Pfizer boosters were approved, as you know, last month, and people can start getting those boosters from around the 28th of December or thereabouts. But in other regulatory news, we heard a little while ago that the rapid antigen testing prices in South Africa have been cut following intervention from the competition authorities. We understand that those test kits were available or are available from UNICEF at around 50 Rand or $3, and were being sold for around 350 Rand or $21 not so long ago. So this price cut now follows an agreement less than 2 weeks ago which saw the PCR test prices cut by the 3 major laboratories. So good news, and hopefully that price gouging will come to an end. Beatrice?
All right, Angelo Coppola for us there in Johannesburg. Thank you. Meanwhile, new studies in Britain suggest that the Omicron COVID variant is milder than the Delta variant, while the risk of hospitalization stays up to 40% lower. This is still preliminary data, and with a record 100,000 new daily infections in the UK, senior health officials fear the virus remains a serious threat this winter. Michael Voss reports.
This may be the age of Omicron, but that didn't deter hundreds of New Age revellers crowding around Stonehenge, celebrating the winter solstice, most without masks. Yet in central London, the streets are much quieter than normal, far fewer shoppers in the run-up to Christmas, and many of the West End theatres closed. The biggest queues are outside vaccination centres as people line up for their third booster vaccines. More than 6 million booster jabs were given in the past week, and more than half the population is now triple jabbed. The latest research from both South Africa and the UK suggests that the Omicron variant is less severe, leading to fewer hospitalisations. But with a record 106,000 new cases reported in the UK, there are still fears that this could overload the health service. Hospitals are also worried that large numbers of staff are having to self-isolate.
A major problem for us is staffing. So most of our staff are fully vaccinated, but they still have to isolate if they're contacts, and we still have had staff contract COVID, and that puts huge pressure on our systems. We are always kind of running with just enough staff, and anything that puts that in danger is a real problem.
While much of the developed world is rapidly rolling out booster jabs, the World Health Organization remains concerned that the poorer nations are not being vaccinated.
It's frankly difficult to understand how a year since the first vaccines were administered, 3 in 4 health workers in Africa remain unvaccinated. While some countries are now rolling out blanket booster programs, only half of WHO's member states have been able to reach the target of vaccinating 40% of their populations by the end of the year because of distortions in global supply.
Britain's former Prime Minister Gordon Brown has called the poor global vaccine rollout a stain on our soul. For the moment, no extra restrictions are being imposed in England before Christmas, with the government saying it needs more data before deciding what to do next. Michael Voss, CGTN, London.
Uganda is considering rolling out booster shots for eligible people following a surge in COVID-19 cases. The booster plan has been endorsed by the cabinet and health officials. The government says the country has enough vaccines in stock. Michael Beleke tells us more.
Uganda's Ministry of Health says the number of COVID-19 cases is rising fast, and they believe the new Omicron variant may be responsible for the surge. The government says they are now considering to roll out booster doses for those already vaccinated. The move aims to protect people against symptomatic and severe illness from COVID-19.
In terms of the stock that we have in the country and also the pipeline, the vaccines which we expect will be more than enough to vaccinate Ugandans, and therefore we are now embarking on giving what we call a booster dose.
More than 10 million doses have so far been administered in Uganda, but health officials say cases are still rising, with more than 1 in 10 people tested for COVID-19 showing a positive result. They say the number of hospitalizations has also increased.
I think what is still helping us is that this variant of Omicron, it spreads very fast, but is not as virulent as the Delta variant. Virulent means disease-causing. It's not as disease-causing as the Delta variant, which was responsible for the second wave. Because the majority of the cases of Omicron are asymptomatic.
Uganda has so far registered more than 130,000 cases of COVID-19. The government plan is to vaccinate at least 22 million people above the age of 18 by the end of the year. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Nigeria has destroyed over 1 million doses of outdated COVID-19 vaccines. The batches expired since November. Authorities say they were donated by some international donors just a month before their expiration. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam tells us more.
Vaccine hesitancy has posed a major challenge for the West African nation, so government's making this public to raise citizens' confidence in its vaccination program.
We have successfully withdrawn about 1,066,214 doses of expired AstraZeneca vaccines. We have come through in our promise to all Nigerians to be transparent. Today is an opportunity for Nigerians to have further faith in our vaccination program.
The shots are part of over 2.5 million doses received from international donors in October. Authorities say they had a very short shelf life.
A few months ago, when these vaccines were offered to us, we knew that they had a short shelf life. But we were living in an environment where the supply of COVID-19 vaccines were very scarce. They were not available due to vaccine nationalism.
The vaccines come in with short expiration dating pose a challenge to us as a country. But because of the love of country, we decided to work with that tight time span or challenge.
Government says it saved up to $40 million from vaccine donations. Meanwhile, the infection rate in Nigeria is witnessing a spike amid a fourth wave of the coronavirus pandemic. The West African nation recorded over 2,000 new COVID-19 infections on Tuesday alone, the highest daily record since January. Only about 10 million Nigerians have been vaccinated so far, and officials say they hope to scale up efforts in order to vaccinate up to half of its population by next year. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
Tunisians will now have to present a vaccine passport to board all public and private transportation. A presidential decree imposed the immunity passport from December the 22nd. Many Tunisians have voiced their complaints about the restrictions.
The National Interurban Transport Company imposed vaccination requirements for public and private transport users. All commuters need to present their immunization document or show proof of vaccination.
No one is allowed to access the public and private transport stations without holding the vaccine passport. We trained our agents on how to deal with the commuters. We will not make any exemptions in order to protect public health.
Some people have welcomed the government decision, urging unvaccinated citizens to get their first jab in order to resume a normal life.
Now going anywhere, including to a bar, restaurant, cafe or a nightclub, requires a vaccine passport. This is a good measure to push people who are still reluctant to get vaccinated. I fully understand the government's decision. Everyone should get a vaccine pass.
However, many citizens who have criticized the mandatory immunity passport say it's difficult for businesses to adhere to the new COVID-19 restrictions.
This vaccine pass is important for public health, but it's disastrous for the economy. More than 50% of the population is not vaccinated. If all these people are not allowed to shop or go to restaurants, then all businesses will lose clients and money. The vaccine was supposed to help and not shut down businesses.
The Scientific and Technical Committee at the Health Ministry announced that its online platform for vaccine passports was blocked for several hours on Thursday, when tens of thousands of people connected to the platform. The Ministry of Communication Technologies launched a temporary text message service to solve the system breakdown problem.
Tunisia widens vaccination pass restrictions to curb the COVID-19 surge in the country. The health minister said only pregnant women and patients are exempted from presenting the coronavirus vaccination pass to access private clinics and hospitals. Aden Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Libya's parliament has ordered the formation of a new committee to create a roadmap for elections after December the 24th, when the nation's polls were to take place. This comes after the country's electoral commission proposed postponing the vote by a month. The move confirms an expected delay of the process that was largely hoped would bring to an end nearly a decade of unrest in Libya.
Libya's election, intended to coincide with parliamentary polls, was part of a United Nations-led peace process. However, lawmakers said on Wednesday that after consultations, they deemed it impossible to hold the exercise on the set date. The House of Representatives says it will convene on December 27th to discuss the situation.
When the House of Representatives saw that the 24th will be a normal day and will not hold any electoral process, they made a communication parliamentary committee, especially after the work of the Elections Commission stopped. And the communication parliamentary committee contacted the Elections Commission and received a report from it, and this report will be discussed in the next session, which will be on the next 27th. Through this session, it will be decided, after considering the report, as well as what obstacles the Elections Commission had faced, especially the force majeure, and the extent of the Parliament's abilities to solve them in line with the date proposed by the Commission, or perhaps the matter may need to choose another date. A new date beyond January the 24th may need to be approved by Parliament.
Speculations of a delay had been mounting for weeks leading up to the election. The vote faced challenges, including disputes over election laws and the eligibility of candidates. Libyans have reacted to the latest developments, with some stating that tensions may rise over the looming uncertainty.
Everyone was waiting for these elections to save Libya. We want a president elected by the people to govern Libya, who would be recognized by all states in the world in order to get us out of this crisis.
We hope that the war won't return. War brings nothing but destruction, ruin and displacement. So we hope that it won't return.
All Libyans are disappointed. There had been excitement that on December 24th we would get a new kind of person to save the country and give us something of themselves. And we were happy about the elections. We wanted them on December 24th. Now they have been postponed. There is a big problem.
Libya has been experiencing relative calm since a ceasefire deal arrived at in October last year, following a year-long offensive by Eastern-based commander Khalifa Haftar. However, with the latest developments, the potential of a bigger fallout remains ever present. Chamrono, CGTN.
Well, Libya's delayed presidential election could be a relief to the Elections Committee, which couldn't issue a final list of candidates thus far. But the delay may bring Libya back to political conflict that puts the future of the country at risk. Here's more with CGTN's Adel Mahroui.
Officially, the December 24 presidential election in Libya has not been delayed. That's because there is no entity in Libya that has the authority to make that call. Still, many Libyan politicians appear willing to accept the Elections Committee's suggestion to delay the vote by 1 month. But now Libya enters an authoritative vacuum, as no entity can exclusively set a new date for the vote.
Whether it's the 24th of January or even several months later, we cannot speculate which date the election will be held on. There are many divisions in Libya. There is no agreement over a constitutional foundation to legally guide the country's transition. So the fate of any future date could be the same as that of the December 24th vote.
The political scene in Libya gets more complicated as the fate of the UN-backed interim government has raised controversy. Through UN-sponsored talks, Libyans agreed that the cabinet should govern the country until the December 24 vote. Parliament passed a no-confidence vote against the government in September, and interim Prime Minister Abdulhamid Dubaiba stepped aside, delegating his deputy to take over the cabinet while he focuses on running for president.
With the Parliament's no-confidence vote, Dubaiba's government is considered sacked and is acting as a facilitation cabinet. I believe this means it has no specified duration in office. Its task ends with appointment of a new government. Beiba's government could remain in place until the elections are held.
The election committee says that all appeals against presidential candidates must reach a final verdict in court before it can announce the final list of runners in the race. A delay in the Libyan election could also see increase in logistical arrangements for the vote. By the time Libyans are invited to the ballots, more citizens will have come of age to be eligible voters or candidates for either the presidential or parliamentary races. And that could force the Elections Committee to update its voters list, distribute and issue new voting cards. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. The death toll from a Madagascar boat accident climbs to 83. And Russian president warns the West over NATO eastward expansion.
Africa is ending yet another pivotal year. From moments of uncertainty to moments of triumph, moments of unrest, moments of rapid change in business, climate change, security and diplomacy, and coming back from the brink. All these and much more on Events 2021.
The death toll from a shipwreck in Madagascar has risen to 83. The incident occurred off the coast of northeastern Madagascar, where a cargo ship sank on Monday. Maritime authorities say 138 people were on board. 5 passengers remain missing after rescue efforts were interrupted by bad weather on Wednesday. The ship, which was not authorized to take passengers, was overloaded and water soon flooded the engine, causing it to sink. Within hours of the disaster, a police helicopter sent to aid in search efforts crashed with a police minister, Sergei Gele, on board. Gele survived by swimming for 12 hours trying to reach land. Another passenger from the helicopter, a mechanic, was also found alive. However, 2 other passengers remain unaccounted for.
There were 4 of us, the director of security for the Prime Minister, who is one of my students, then the pilot, the mechanic, and me. I was behind the pilot, but I don't know if there were any survivors. I do not know. I just got out of it myself. Then the helicopter crashed, and there you go. I didn't have a life jacket. There were 2 of us who didn't have one. The pilot and the mechanic had them, so I immediately took the pilot's seat and used it as a lifeline. This saved me. I swam from 7:30 at night until 7:30 the next morning. I thank heaven for that.
This is what happened. We are fishermen and we were going fishing. We were out at sea at 4 a.m. and then we saw him as we hoisted the sails. He called out for help. He called us. We heard the cry. He said, "Help us because our helicopter has crashed. Help."
On to Guinea now, and the leader of a 2008 coup has returned to the West African country after more than a decade in exile in Burkina Faso. Moussa Dadis Camara left Guinea after narrowly surviving an assassination attempt carried out by one of his own bodyguards. Camara was a little-known army captain when he seized power in December 2008 after the death of longtime dictator Lansana Conté. His brief rule was marked by a stadium massacre against peaceful demonstrators. At least 157 people were killed, according to UN figures. It remains unclear if the 57-year-old could face criminal charges. No trial has ever been held for the perpetrators of the violence. And for years, Guinean government had resisted Camara's permanent return, fearing it could stoke political instability. At least 8 people have been killed by gunmen in Nigeria's northwest states of Kaduna and Katsina. The gunmen also kidnapped more than 20 others. Tese Makende reports.
Authorities say both attacks happened on Tuesday night, and among those killed is a retired soldier. The residents say some of the gunmen were dressed in military uniforms. The United Nations says more than 300 students were abducted by the gangs in Katsina State in December last year. Authorities in Kaduna State say over 300 people were killed in the state and over 800 kidnapped by the same gangs earlier this year. President Muhammadu Buhari says his government is committed to ending insecurity and has directed his security chief to destroy the remaining vestiges of terrorists and criminal gangs in the country. Tessim Akinde, CGTN Jos, Nigeria.
Russia says it wants to avoid conflict with Ukraine and the West. President Vladimir Putin repeated the statement during his annual marathon press conference. The event comes amid soaring tensions over NATO expansion and weapons sales to Ukraine. Stuart Smith has more.
Once again, he emphasised that this was a problem of NATO's making, that Russia has no intention to invade, and the reason these demands have come from Russia recently, for example, asking the United States and NATO to move to stop its eastward expansion. These demands have come now because Russia is worried about an escalation in conflict and wants guarantees that there is some breathing room between Russia and the West. So once again reiterated that dialogue is the solution. He says there is an agreement with the United States for negotiators to meet in Geneva next year. So dialogue is making progress, but you could tell this is an issue the president definitely wants to try and solve quickly. A sense of frustration that more progress has not been made over the past few decades on this problem with NATO and Russia.
Putin also hailed China-Russia relations and said Moscow will continue to deepen ties with Beijing in trade, climate change, space exploration and more. Let's take a listen.
President Xi and myself, we call each other friends, and we have a good personal contact. China is definitely a major powerhouse of the global and the regional economy. Naturally, we are developing our relations with them. We have more than 100 billion of bilateral trade, and we have surpassed the pre-pandemic levels. China is our #1 trade partner. We both undertook the commitments to reach the carbon neutrality by 2060, but before we'll be supplying all types of energy resources to China, and we will be ready to do that afterwards, because history will not end in 2060 and carbon neutrality may be attained differently. We have been toiling in culture interaction, just the cross years of youth, science, education and culture that knits us together and brings us closer to one another.
Well, let's now go to Ramanyang for a look at the day's business news. Rama.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in business. In business, China vows to further open up its market, the second largest economy in the world, to the rest of the planet. And South Africa is signalling support for a review of its fuel price formula. The details coming up next.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership comes into effect from January 2022. A Commerce Ministry spokesperson says that China will further open up its market to the rest of the world by building a more transparent and market-oriented business environment. The country will also be working to boost coordinated development within the region. With regard to the implementation of the Phase 1 of the trade deal between China and the US, a spokesperson says that China hopes that the United States will create conditions that are conducive for both sides to expand their trade flows. In the meantime, the US chip maker Intel has apologized to China for writing a letter telling its suppliers not to use goods or services derived from Xinjiang province. That letter triggered severe backlash on the web. China's foreign ministry says that Intel should not be basing its decision on what it described as false accusations.
希望有关企业能够尊重事实，明辨是非。
We hope the company can respect the facts and distinguish right from wrong. We have said many times that allegations of forced labor in Xinjiang are lies fabricated by American anti-China forces. They aim to damage China's image, undermine stability in Xinjiang, and hinder China's development. The people of Xinjiang are brave and diligent, and Xinjiang's products are high quality. If a company chooses not to use them, it will be their loss.
Now, a new global agreement was reached last month during the 26th Conference of Parties, or COP26 as it's more commonly known. Leaders there pledged to cut emissions, reduce the use of coal and phase out subsidies that artificially lower the price of coal, oil and natural gas. In Greece, the Environment and Energy Ministry has identified 5 key policy measures that it needs to implement. Evangelos Sipsas reports.
Let me start by stating the obvious. We are running out of time and we need to act now.
That opening sentence from the Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis in his speech at the COP26 summit in Glasgow last month shows just how important the issue of climate change is for Greece. The country is already seeing the dramatic effects of global warming, from the latest floods to the unprecedented events of last summer's heat wave and wildfires. Although Greece has a small carbon footprint, it's taking big steps towards a green transition.
I think everyone around the world, not only in Greece, sees that we are facing a climate crisis, not climate change, and our goal is not to reach a climate collapse. The first thing that Greece is doing is to shut down all its coal-fired power stations by 2028. We are decarbonising our economy at a really fast pace, and by 2023 we will connect all the inhabited islands with the mainland power grid. What does that mean? It means that we are changing the kind of energy we consume by putting power stations run on renewable energy almost everywhere.
After the Glasgow meeting, the Greek government introduced a new legal framework of national targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It foresees a reduction of 55% by 2030 and 80% by 2040, with the goal of achieving net zero by 2050. Its focus is not only to impose a green energy transition on people, but to encourage them to change.
We have announced a consultation on climate law so that we can bring together coherent ideas and mobilise society and the economy. We will also establish a number of small initiatives, for example, a programme called We Move Electricity, providing grants for everything from electrical bikes to business equipment. We also have plans to develop the infrastructure needed in order to decrease the carbon footprint of buildings. But the main thing is to change the way people live and behave, so our everyday professional and private life can become greener.
Over the past few years, the Greek government has been pushing for a climate-neutral society by creating a climate crisis ministry, interconnecting the country's mainland renewable power grid with the islands, and investing in electric vehicles, with the latest announcement being that all taxis in the country should be replaced with electric cars by 2025, a move that the taxi union is not really happy with.
We will certainly have problems switching to electric. Our industry is already in debt from previous years, after the decade-long debt crisis, followed by the pandemic and lockdowns. We have accumulated a lot of debt, which we still owe to the bank and the tax office. So in order to convince us to change to electric vehicles, the government should figure that out first before imposing new laws.
Overall, Athens is proposing spending close to $50 billion on renewable energy projects by 2030 and is promising a more ambitious climate target. Its goal: to hit the emergency brake in emissions and encourage people to go green. Evangelos Sipsas for CGTN, Athens.
Now, South Africa's Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana may be backing calls for a review in the way domestic fuel prices are calculated. This comes after the Minerals and Energy Department announced that it actually had made an error in the recent set of fuel price adjustments. Sumitra Naidu has the details.
Fuel prices in South Africa are at a record high. It now costs $1.33 for just 1 litre of petrol. Filling up an average tank is in the region of $80. The development has prompted calls for reform in the country's fuel pricing.
There are many different components that go into the cost of a litre of fuel in South Africa. Retail margins, wholesale margins, storage, secondary storage, wharfage, and then obviously the levies. Now, the two biggest levies in South Africa are the General Fuel Levy and the Road Accident Fund Levy. So what we would like to see is a total review of all of the components that go into it, an audit of all of those components, and a review of the process used to calculate the monthly fuel prices.
It's been a particularly hard year for South Africans, having to deal with COVID-19 and the rising cost of living. Fuel prices hit a record high this year and has already impacted every single sector of this economy.
Petrol and food, yeah, it's too expensive.
Things are actually becoming expensive these days. It's really becoming too difficult to keep up with a lot of things because pretty much everything is going up.
The taxi fare is too much. The money just go to the transport, it go to the food.
Levies make up over a third of the price of fuel, but is the government prepared to remove these taxes?
I can assure that I'm as concerned with the rising fuel prices as any other South Africans. To the extent that we may have to play a role, we'll do whatever it can to support a reform of the fuel price.
So an income that the government gets, which is very easy for them to collect and which generates billions, 110 billion rand annually, is not something government would ordinarily want to do away with. So you have to ask, how are they going to replace?
The Department of Energy admitted to making an error in its latest calculation. Fuel prices rose 81 cents on the 1st of December. A few days later, the increase was adjusted lower to 75 cents. But motorists were already angered by the recent hikes and are demanding changes. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
On to an oil-producing state. Libya is thinking of contracting private oil companies to manage its facilities. The objective here is to compensate workers, essentially according to their output. Bonuses to those who meet production targets, penalties to those who do not. The news does come at a time when at least 4 oil fields are seeing strikes, and that's decreased national oil production by around a quarter. CGTN's Adel El-Marouki now reports.
Moving on a national plan to bring back its oil production from 1.25 million barrels daily to 1.4 million, Libya's interim government is considering hiring foreign companies to lead the task. Petroleum Minister Mohamed Aoun says the country aims to reach 2.1 million barrels and 4 million cubic feet of natural gas daily within the next 5 years. Reaching that target, however, will need an increase in employees' efficiency. To do so, Libya wants these foreign companies to pay the oil and gas workforce based on productivity of each field.
Currently, it is very difficult to keep oil production efficient. The political scene, of course, has a great impact on all sectors, including oil. Oil production needs to be modernized with new technologies to operate and connect fields. That needs foreign investments. Investments need stability.
The fate of Libya's general elections remains unclear, which frightens foreign investors away. The instability's impact on oil production was evident this week after strikes saw a slowdown in 4 major fields, including El Sharara, the country's biggest. As a result, the average oil production is 300,000 barrels short daily.
Salaries are the apparent reason for this strike, but it is common to see the petroleum sector get involved in politics, so there could be hidden motives. There is a battle over power that involves Western Libya, so this could be part of that fight.
Tension between the interim oil minister Aoun and the chairman of the national oil company Mustafa Sanallah has been mounting since August. Aoun's attempts to suspend the NOC's head has failed, leaving Sanallah's influence over managing Libya's oil exports as strong as it had been during the years of turmoil. With an estimated reserve of 48 billion barrels, Libya has the biggest confirmed oil reserves in Africa. The black gold represents 95% of the country's economy, and there's enough oil in Libya to last it for a century at the current production capacity. But political disputes are keeping oil underground, and without elections, the country's economy could collapse. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Somalia's central bank recently launched a national payment system that makes it a lot easier for local banks to transact business amongst themselves. That platform is part of ongoing reforms to improve the economy of the country, and it's already bearing fruit. Millions of dollars of transactions have already gone through the system. CGTN's Mohamed Kahir sat down with the governor of Somalia's central bank and filed this report.
Launched 5 months ago, Somalia's national payment system has already removed several barriers in the growing banking sector. According to the governor of the central bank, the platform is a game changer.
It makes the transaction between the businesses very smooth, efficient, and it happens within minutes. So this is a new dawn for the financial sector of the country. Therefore, one of the major achievements is, and we are getting very good feedbacks from individual customers and of the banks and businesses. They changed the whole dynamics of the financial sector. And we see the benefits already. Millions worth of millions dollar worth of transactions have been already gone through the system for the last 5 months since we launched the system.
The governor confirmed that there are ongoing plans to issue new Somali currency as part of measures by the institution to strengthen the economy.
One of the major, the responsibilities and mandates of the central bank, as you know, is the issuing and distribution and safeguarding for the national currency. Therefore, this is a top priority for us, the central bank of Somalia, and we have already started the plans to issue the Somali currency after many years. This requires a lot of preparation, and we have done most of the preparatory work to reprint the Somali shilling.
The Somali Bankers Association acknowledges the operations of the national payment system have boosted the financial security.
The system enables the central bank to closely monitor the transactions and trace possible illegal transactions such as fraud, money laundering. I believe this new system will take the financial industry in the country to the next level when it comes to financial security, efficiency, as well as making every move traceable. It is a game changer.
The relative peace and stability experienced in the country in the past years is attracting foreign investment, mainly in Mogadishu. The international financial institutions from the neighboring countries, the Gulf states, as well as Turkey, are waiting for approval to join the booming market to have their share. Hamid Kahi, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
And I'll leave it there for the time being. I'll be back at the top of the hour in Global Business. We'll be exploring an interesting countdown. From the 1st of January 2022, Ethiopia is set to lose its AGOA access privileges to the US market. So where does that leave the future of trade between Ethiopia on one hand and the United States on the other? We'll explore that and plenty more at 1800 GMT. See you then. For now, back to Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. And let's go straight to Rwanda, where a growing mountain gorilla population is a cause for celebration and concern at the same time. The Volcano National Park is facing a space issue as the growing population means a park expansion is much needed. Ashtatal has more on how authorities are planning to tackle the issue.
Rwanda's Volcanoes National Park is considered a conservation triumph. The park has managed to increase their population of mountain gorillas. In 2010, a census carried out by the park recorded 880 of the primates. In 2015, 1,063 mountain gorillas were recorded. But the growing population has posed challenges.
The interactions themselves changed in the sense that they became very violent, and during this period, we recorded 7 silverback deaths. So that's, again, a consequence of more groups ranging in the same area, really not expanding and going to the rest of the park, and that leading to more intergroup interactions and then more infanticides.
In an effort to combat this, the park is looking to expand.
So we are aiming in the next 5-10 years to expand the park by 37 square kilometer, which correspond to 23% increase of the effective habitat of the park. And as part of this process, we are going to relocate people, estimated around 4,000 households.
Authorities say they will compensate displaced families, housing them in newly constructed model villages. A prototype is already visible in Musanze, a district which contains the largest part of the Volcanoes National Park. Astatal, CGTN.
Well, let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Egypt's Al Ahly crowned CAF Super Cup champions with a win over Raja Casablanca.